anyway, I had to go to county lockup 30 days, and I got out, and my friends, like any good military friend should do, said, "You want to like pay rent or get food? No, let's throw a party and invite whores and have a gangbang."
Hey, welcome back to Four for the Road, everybody. Oh, okay. So that was the third intro, and that was the second one that Jim fucked up on purpose.
Fucking run it.
Anyways, we're just gonna run it. So what the fuck were we talking about today? We were talking about the we're gonna do the deep dive of the 1% history show, the part 2, if you will, from I believe it was episode 55. So if you haven't listened to that one yet, please stop listening to this one. Go listen to 55. Come back, you'll get caught up. But we are going to go over some wave tops first, and then these two gentlemen are going to do the deep dive because they're much more knowledgeable on this other stuff than I am. And I didn't want to give you guys
false. No, you don't have to edit this.
Anyway.
But we're gonna let the listeners know this is your baby. You're gonna dick it down, and Jim and I are just gonna fluff you where appropriate. So
you are the big show.
I think this is actually going to be called 1% History Part 2 : the Fluffening. So anyways, if you were anything like me coming up in this life, one of the big things while you were prospecting or while you were hanging around while they were teaching you motorcycle club history was the history of the 1% diamond, because that's a very important piece of our culture. And again, if you were anything like me, you were told that it came from the Hollister riots in 1947, and that it was pick a publication, whether it was Time, Life, the San Francisco Chronicle, the LA Times. There was a bunch of different publications that get quoted for this, that they put out an article shortly after that saying that 1% of the people were fucked up and 99% of these people were actually okay. And then you'll hear that the AMA put out a statement shortly after the Hollister riot in 1947 saying that, well, 99% of the bikers were doing okay. And that was correct, but the timing doesn't add up. So you kind of take it with a grain of salt, right? But I know Dave trying to give me some credit here, but he did all this research first. He gave me a starting point, pointed me in a direction, and told me to go. To basically confirm his findings. And what I found was that I was given bad information. And that's okay, right? Because when you teach something for so long and there's so many different people teaching the same thing, it's really easy for you to believe what you're teaching people without having to do research. Or if you trust somebody, like I trust Dave and Jim, they could tell me the sky's fucking purple. I don't have to look outside. I trust them. I know they're not going to lead me down a wrong path. The sky's just fucking purple now. So Dave put me in the right direction, says, all right, man, start from here, go, have fun. This is like keywords that I looked up, and then he didn't help me out with shit after that, right? He let me run my own course to see if we came to the same conclusion, which we did. And that was
hang on. I would argue, though, that you found a lot of new stuff that I didn't have. And I think we ran up against some of the same items where nailing down an exact date is hard. You can get within, I would say, a year. You can get within a 12-month time frame. But getting an exact date for, a culture that even today historically doesn't give a shit about keeping time. I don't know if you guys have ever heard this. They were like, I'll fuck it up. I don't remember. It's something much more wittier, but it's like, why a biker doesn't wear a watch is because I'm on X, Y, and Z club time or something like that, So, his dates are hard. And so you took some of the stuff that I found and then just tried to pin it down even more, which you found, like we all have done, it's fucking hard to do.
Yeah. And for the military folks out here, they'll get this analogy. Dave gave me a 4-digit grid, and I got us to an 8-digit grid. All right, we're waiting on Jim to get us to even closer than that.
Well, I thought Jim would get us a lot closer because he was there for Hollister, but
right.
No, but my club was. In fact, we won the race.
Oh, here we go.
I'll point that out. We have the trophy. So.
Hey, Ken, in your research, if we're starting, hopefully for our listeners, they know the clubs did not start at Hollister. What year was Hollister?
1947.
And so motorcycle clubs had been around for 47 years at that point. So people are like, well, Yonkers wasn't established in 1900. No, it wasn't. But in England, there was a motorcycle club established in 1900. So that's why I say 47 years.
But Dave, what was the name of that motorcycle club?
It was really crazy. So they were formed in London, and it was the London Motorcycle Club. Hold on to your hats.
I mean, we'll probably have to come back to this, but I could have swore I found something on like in the late 1890s. Like with
bicycle clubs. Well, that's where
they were all on motorized bicycles. Anyways,
that's where like Yonkers. I mean, George Ellis from Yonkers MC was a famous bicycle rider, racer before he decided to strap a motor on that bad boy and send it around the track too. So yeah, I mean, the roots the point is the roots were well established before Hollister. But I'm interested in your research. I don't know if you brought it to the table. It's hard to remember everybody. But as a quick recap, some of the clubs that were at Hollister.
Man, let's see. I know the Booze Fighters Motorcycle Club was there. There was this. What's that fucking?
Tread lightly, young man.
What's that? At the time, the patch changed. I think.
It's something with like a cat, right, or something like that.
A boot or something.
Was there like a number? I think there was like a number involved. Wait. Top Hatters. Top Hatters were there.
12.
Market Street Commandos were there.
Help me out with that.
All right, so we've got the Booze Fighters. We've got the Market Street Commandos.
Don't fucking with him. Yeah, Market Street Commandos, the Booze Fighters, obviously the 13 Rebels. They were the champions that year.
Oh, those guys. You mean the guys that won the race?
That's what I meant by they were the champions that year. I'm responsible for at least 3 of his gray hairs. What, the Yellow Jackets? I don't know if we said that. The Bombers MC, I believe, was there. Or that was Riverside. Anyways, no. So there's a lot of clubs there. Now the town of Hollister, 1947, had between, depending on which census report you read from which part of California, had between 2,000 and 4,000 people that lived in Hollister, right? And mostly like farmers, shop owners. This is, think small town vibes, right? And just lots of fucking kids working on these farms, right? It was a travesty. But anyways, I digress. So, 1947, the AMA hosts the Gypsy Tour at the racetrack there. And bikers doing what bikers do. We're like, hey, we're going to go over there. We're going to fucking party. We're going to watch the races. We're going to have a great time. And the infrastructure in Hollister, California at the time was not fucking set up for the 5,000 additional human souls that were going to come to Hollister, California. Now, when you read the news articles and stuff like that are available, because we live in 2022 and news publications are actually the complete opposite of the motorcycle club scene, and they are very great at keeping track of old articles and times and all that stuff. So when you go back through, you read the articles talking about the infamous Hollister riot and how they descended upon Hollister on their fire-belching death machines. You'll read it and you're like, wow, this sounds like really fucking terrible things. But then you read the police reports and it's just like, so there was like a couple $100 in damage. A cop got punched in the face for startling somebody awake in a park. And then I think the worst part about it was there was some bathing suits left in the bottom of the pool. I mean, obviously, there was street racing. There were some fights, some bar fights and stuff like that.
Well, and I think, we've all kind of seen the famous stuff from Hollister. We know the story. Eddie Davenport's a very famous story for those that don't know. Eddie Davenport was the biker with the beer bottles spread around the bike, but it was either that the bike wasn't his. He wasn't drunk. Obviously, we know today because his name was Eddie Davenport. The cut that he was wearing of the racing jacket for the there you go, Tulare Riders. We know it wasn't his because it literally said Dave at the bottom of it.
Dave.
There's a really great story about Gus. Gus. It's his name. Is it Serpa? I can't. DeSerpa. But Gus worked at the movie theater behind the famous picture where Eddie Davenport is set up, and he tries to he tries to ruin the picture by being in it because he knows that it's fake and it's set up. I mean, we're all kind of, familiar with those stories. We know that, some of our very famous clubs of today, not name dropping or anything, but we know that, the Galloping Goose were at Hollister. We know that some of the clubs like the Pissed Off Bastards of Bloomington were there. Some of these clubs would go on to become Hell's Angels chapters and things like that. We know that that's kind of like this history and this melting pot. But I think the stuff that Ken found that was just really super entertaining. Is entertaining the right word? Informative, learning, whatever. As a history nerd, I say entertaining, but
I mean, yeah, it was all of the above. Like, it was a learning experience, and I enjoy learning about the culture, so it's entertaining, and obviously informative because we learn something new about the culture. And I do want to just like take a second here. I know you already said it, and I said it in episode 55 that people should be listening to before listening to this episode. But we are going to be dropping names of motorcycle clubs, right? But it's not meant with any disrespect, any malice. This is just history, and we're reciting history based upon the years of research that we've done with this. And it's not like we're showing any affiliation with anybody or any support for anybody, because it's not what we do here at Four for the Road.
No, I mean, you absolutely, and all you're doing really to any club that's mentioned is paying homage to the fact that they were at an event that kind of has roots to a modern movement. And instead of being it, for whatever wild ass reason, if somebody was going to be pissed off about that being in a podcast, you shouldn't. You should feel honored to be a part of that heritage as well, if that's a club that you belong to that's mentioned in that history. If you're a supporter of that club, you should just shut the fuck up and just listen to the podcast, because if you get mad, you're a fucking idiot. But how much I'd be interested, and I'm not trying to speed it up at all, but Jim's got Matlock coming up, but how much carryover did you find from like some of the, I think everybody that's followed Four for the Road knows that the reporting was just astronomically fucking out of proportion, and a license to print whatever you wanted and all this stuff. How much carryover did you find between Hollister and the Riverside riot as far as like stuff that was used and misinterpreted?
So hang on.
Oh, go ahead.
If I could, because I'm listening to this as someone who doesn't really know. They just tuned into our podcast. So, Ken, if you could just go real quick, take 2 minutes to go. We're going to talk about this, Hollister. We're going to talk about Riverside.
Yeah, sure.
We're going to talk about Tecate. So people will just know where this is going.
So there's three main events that we're going to be discussing today. And then Dave and Jim are going to hopefully help me out with some of the smaller, extremely important, but kind of peripheral events, right? Because it all ties in and it's all important. And when you remove one thing from this machine, basically, it won't fucking work, right? Like nothing adds up. So 1947, you have the Hollister riot in Hollister, California. And you fast forward a year, you have the Riverside riot with the air quotes in Riverside, California. And then you're going to fast forward some other years into 1960, 1961 to Tecate, Mexico, where they don't really have a name for it. I just call it like the Tecate incident. And these are, in my opinion, the three main events that led to the creation of the 1% diamond that we see today. With Hollister being, if you're looking at something like we're painting a picture, Hollister would be the frame, right? They built the frame, they have the framework. And this is all media, right? This is all media figuring out what's working, what sells, right? Because hearing about a broken beer bottle and a couple of dudes that got in a fight, that's not going to sell newspapers. But
so you're telling me that almost 80 years later, we're in 2022, newspaper sensationalism is still alive and well?
Oh yeah, if anything, it's gotten way worse. But then we're going to go to 1948. That's where we put the canvas on, right? We're going to put the canvas around the frame. And then in the 60s, that's when we're going to start brushing paint onto the canvas to actually create the 1% diamond. So I'm sorry. Thank you for that, Jim. I appreciate you. So
I would go more with the 1% moniker, because the diamond is kind of
yeah. Like, right. So like, it's all
So yeah, we're talking about the creation of the label of calling a biker a 1%er, not so much the patch. So just so people understand that, we're talking about the label itself, not how somebody chose to wear it.
Correct.
True. So we're gonna fast forward a year, to Riverside, California, 1948, and it's literally copy paste, right? It's the same shit happened just in a year later in a different city. But there are very slight differences. One, there was actually some real property damage done this time. There was an awning that was destroyed of a shopkeep's, right? And he fucking called the sheriff. He said, I don't want none of your fucking deputies. You come down here and you fix this. Sheriff gets down there. He says, well, wait a minute. I personally have cited you 3 times to get this fixed because the wood was rotting. The hardware wasn't the right hardware to bolt all that material together. It was unsafe for the public. And a biker leaned on it. It knocked it over. And then part of that ended up actually injuring the biker a little bit. But the biker decided not to press charges or to seek any, to recover any damages.
And if somebody wants to kind of deep dive on Hollister and stuff like that, or Riverside, one thing that history has done a good job that includes dates and things like that is police reports. They're still available. They're published in newspapers that are still archives, and you can go back and look at them. One of the things that I love about Riverside is you have the newspapers using pictures of shit, booze fighters. Ken, any idea who they were? I'm drawing a blank. I want to say Fat Boy and somebody else, but it doesn't matter.
Oh, come on now, you got it.
I'm one short, but it not meant as disrespect.
So it was Terry Faulkner,
who was on the back of not her husband's bike, but Fat Boy's bike or Vern's bike.
Fat Boy Nelson.
Yeah, and Vern was the other one. Vern was the other one.
Now, yes, I could be wrong on that, right? I could be wrong on whose bike, but I'm like 99% sure it was she was on the back of Nelson's bike.
Maybe, but the other person with them was Vern Autry.
Yeah.
And so that picture was actually taken in Hollister and then used to represent wild ass bikers in Riverside. And what I love, and not related to this at all, so I don't want to rabbit hole it, but I've published an article a few times before where there's like a tabloid magazine, think of like the National Enquirer, that talks about like Congress and hookers and call girls and drugs and all this stuff. It's like the steamy thing. And like, I don't remember if it was the 60s or the 70s, but they actually used that exact same picture from Hollister of Terry to represent these wild women in this article. So the newspapers haven't changed, but
I just want to add to that real quick. I want to say it was in like the 50s. They used that photo too to warn. There was some religious material used. That picture was used in to warn against VD and like open invite to like come to the church and stuff like that because bikers are scary. So they wanted to use that to scare people away from that and come to church.
So you can literally look at these police reports, and like in Riverside, the undersheriff, Sheriff Abbott, he talks about the fact that the media is, he was upset, not so much, he wasn't defending the bikers, but he was upset that the media was making his town look bad. And he said, look, there was 46 arrests in town for this riot, air quotes. Yes, but 6 of them were already residents of my town. And then, the newspaper was like, hey, somebody died. This is big news for 1948 or whatever. But he's like, what they don't tell you is that was a car accident like 100 miles outside of Riverside. Like that was not related to this event at all.
So let's dive on that for a second too. So I found that car accident. Car accident? Yeah. So that car accident was traveling towards Riverside. The driver was drunk and it was a solo vehicle accident. So they're trying to blame a DUI death on the fucking bikers there.
Hey, so is this Jim? Maybe, it's Jim, you're the guru of racing and stuff like that. First of all, I would love to know, were the 13 Rebels at Riverside to like defend a championship? And also I know that it was a 100-mile motorcycle race put on by the Riverside Bombers Motorcycle Club as part of the AMA events for 4th of July. Is that something you guys had ever participated in before or anything like that, or after Riverside, et cetera? I love the history of that old racing.
So I've been looking for it, and anytime I say anything about my club, it's because I have proof somewhere. You know, so I've never found anything that says we were at Riverside, but all over Hollister, like I said, we have the trophy, or we have pictures of our guy, um, Van Sickle, with the trophy that he won. But I've never seen anything to do with Riverside.
And for the folks like just getting into bikes or biker history of MC history and stuff like that, Jim, can you take us a little bit down the I know we're not quite there yet for the wild one, but coming out of Hollister, the wild one would be influenced by Hollister and by Riverside. So the making of the wild one kind of smashed these two events together, and then obviously took a liberal license from Hollywood. But the two famous characters in there, come from well-established motorcycle clubs and real-life characters. Ken or Jim, can you guys go into that a little bit?
Sure, I'll take that. So, the Wild One movie is based on a short story called The Cyclist Raid, which is where the mashup between Hollister and Riverside is. And I don't know if you ever read The Cyclist Raid. It's kind of boring. You can find it online. But anyway, they made a movie, and so Hollywood decided to create what they thought a biker should act like and kind of look like. And they kind of based that around a guy named Shel Thuet, which was in my club, 13 Rebels. And so the producers and the writers and all, now we don't have 100% proof for all this. We have a lot of circumstantial evidence, and we have some pictures that show. I've got a picture that shows that 13 Rebels were there with Lee Marvin, who was one of the stars. He played Chico, the other guy. So Brando played basically a Hollywood version of Shel Thuet from 13 Rebels, and Lee Marvin played a version of what Wino Willie from the Blues Fighters would be. So Brando's character was highly molded by what Hollywood thought the anti-hero leading man would look like. So he's got on this leather jacket. He's got this the Black Rebels Motorcycle Club on the back. One of the prominent guys in my club pointed out that when you look at BRMC on the back of Brando's jacket, the B looks like a 1 and 3, so it looks like 13 Rebels. I don't know how much I'm buying that, but and so anyway, I think both clubs were invited to be technical experts on there. I know Ted Evans was there.
And who's Ted Evans?
Ted Evans with 13 Rebels, and so he was did a lot of work with the motorcycles there. He helped keep them running. And Wino Willie was supposed to come down and be a technical advisor, but he got in a little trouble on the way down and ended up in jail. But so the two clubs were there kind of advising what it was. And at this point, now this is conjecture on my part, but I think the script writers kind of heard the story of 13 Rebels and how the Boost Fighters came from the 13 Rebels. And so Wino Willie, for those that don't know, was a 13 Rebel first. And he left the 13 Rebels to start the Boost Fighters in 46. And there's a little story about that. There was a little mix up there between the two clubs, but it was no big deal. In fact, they were still friends. I got lots of pictures of the two clubs together in the late 40s. So Hollywood writers took that story that there was a breakup between the two, and they made it as part of this movie. So in the movie, you have the two clubs. You have the Black Rider Motorcycle Club, Black Riders, whatever the fuck they were.
Black Rebel.
Black Rebels. Thank you. Black Rebels Motorcycle Club. My fucking Geritol's not kicked in yet. So you had them with Marlon Brando, and the other. And here's a trivia question for you guys: that if you ever want to win money, that guys think they know this movie. What was the name of the other motorcycle club?
The Beatles.
There you go. It's spelled just like the Beatles of the music group. So Hollywood kind of made this into a rivalry between the two. And in reality, it just wasn't there. So anyway, just to get right back to that one little tidbit about that, whereas Brando's character was really Hollywood and what they think he should look like, a biker should look like. Lee Marvin was kind of told, yeah, you're the other guy. And he was kind of left alone. So he started talking to all these bikers. Well, I'm supposed to be this Wino Willie guy. Well, what's Wino Willie like? So he kind of created this whole persona. So whenever you see Lee Marvin's character on screen, that's really what the 1940s, early 50s motorcycle guy looked like. That's what a club guy was back in those days.
And not to go down another rabbit hole, but just for anybody that's listening and has time, you look at the history on the racing shirt, the sweater that Lee Marvin's character wears in that. So it's a black and white movie, but the shirt actually, his kind of, I don't even know what you would call that pattern, but it takes on kind of a life of its own. And so if you get a chance, just go and research the history and how people have tried to find that or where it was passed down to and things like that is kind of a cool history of that as well.
It is. It really is.
So, and that movie was so influential, and I believe that it ties in, right? Because if the community didn't grow, the moniker wouldn't exist. But how did that movie affect leather jacket sales, Jim?
I know where you're going with this.
Are you trying to piss me off?
Yeah, he is. Yeah, so that leather jacket that Brando's wearing, it was just a regular leather jacket that you could buy. But after that movie came out, skyrocketed. You can buy that same leather jacket today. Sales went up like 300%. I mean, it was just outstanding the way that they sold this thing. Lots and lots of money for that company.
Well, and I think it's hard for people to think about today, especially in the context of a black and white movie. But that movie was, I mean, that like your parents wouldn't allow you to go see it at the drive-in. I mean, it was banned in certain countries. It was
banned in England.
I mean, there was talk of trying to fine people by I forget what the term is for the movie association or movie making association of America and stuff like that. I don't know if it was the Screen Actors Guild or whatever back then.
Motion Picture Association.
Yeah, there you go. And banning them and all this stuff. It was a very controversial movie at the time it was made. But, kind of what Ken has found and kind of started to point out here is you have we're not taking away from the importance of the Wild One. We're not taking away the importance of Hollister or the Riverside Riot. We hope that it's making sense anyway, that it's this building crescendo. Did I say that right? Leading to these different events. So you have Hollister, you have Riverside, you have the Cyclist Raid book, but Jesus Christ, Jim. You have the Cyclist Raid by Harper's Ferry. You have the Wild One. And now Ken's going to talk about some more events. You're seeing a lot of the same characters. You're seeing the events. You're seeing sensationalized newspaper reports, that was Facebook. That was Instagram back then. And you're building this idea in John Q. Public's mind that these fucking bikers are out of control. That's all they do is just kill and pillage and all this stuff. So that's the idea that's formulating here.
They're cool also. They're out of control and they're cool. And that's what scared the establishment. That's why that movie was banned, because it made the bad guys, supposedly the bad guys, look cool.
Yeah. All right, Ken, where are we at now?
So we're going to fast forward to Tecate, unless you want to talk about, and I mean you want to talk about any of those peripheral events that I kind of fucking like blew right the fuck over in the last
No, I don't think that you blew over them or anything like that. Like I said, I think we've already established to anybody that's listening that we're trying to build you kind of a rough background idea with more details. And as we get going, and I think after we finish giving you the idea of, boom, here's the birth of the fucking Moniker. Now people have a 1% label to give themselves. Now you start looking at all the cool things that kind of spin off, the iconic characters, the runs, all this stuff. Not that there's not iconic characters and runs and stuff like that beforehand, but really right now we're giving you kind of like, to get to the Moniker, we're skipping over some stuff to get to this Moniker. So, Ken's going to start talking about Death Valley runs. He's going to start talking about Tecate. Like, these are events that were already going on, just like Hollister was already going on and things like that.
No, you're going to start talking about the Death Valley run.
Well, and so the point is, these are just runs that people went to because they were fun shit. You could get fucked up. You could do drugs. You could get drunk. You could race. You could talk about bikes. Like whatever there might have been girls. I don't know. whatever your thing was, is the same reason that people go to motorcycle events today. So it's not like there was a Tecate one and only time. It's not like there was a DVR run one and only time. So that's kind of the point I hope people get as Ken goes forward.
These are building the outlaw image. It's building the outlaw culture.
There you go. Perfect.
So, in 1960, in October, there was another AMA Gypsy Tour hosted by the Mexican town of Tecate, Mexico, right? But what's important to know is that a few months prior, I believe it was June 1960, the Hells Angels and the Satan Slaves were attending an event in Santa Clarita. And some of the civilians were just fucking, I mean, they were drunk too, right? And they were just being kind of fucking disrespectful and fucking, poking fun at like, oh, well, there's like 4 dudes with patches on here and there's like 1 million fucking civilians. And some of these guys thought that the other civilians would have their back, and fucking lo and behold, they did not. But you know what? You fucking run your mouth to somebody in a fucking club and call them all sorts of fucking names and you're being disrespectful. It's not outside the realm of possibility. You get punched in the fucking mouth. And that may have happened to a couple of people a couple of times. And they were specifically told, hey, you cannot come to the races. Do not come to the races. Like, fucking, you're done, right? Well, they fucking showed up anyway, because where there's a party, you will find them. So the big 3 clubs that go down to Tecate in 1960 are the Hells Angels, the Straight Satans, and the Satan Slaves. Right? Now, it's important to know this because these 3 clubs have...
Well, the Gooses were there too.
Yeah, Goose were there too.
Captain Goose
were there too. But, like, these clubs are fucking tight, right? So tight, excluding the Goose, so tight that eventually they become one club, right? 2 of those other clubs end up patching over. I'll let you fucking take a guess which 2 chose to go that route. So we get to Tecate, and it's a fucking mess, right? There are so many fucking people there. Like the racers, the AMA expected some of these racers not to show up, so they let other people register. And too many racers showed up. They couldn't, like, they were gonna have to split the race up, and they were trying to figure out how to do all that. So, anyways, they just started camping. The bikers just started camping, having a good time, having some drinks. And then I will say this one got fucking out of hand, right? A member of one of those clubs was arrested and thrown in jail. And then maybe, allegedly, part of the town caught fire that happened to have the jailhouse in it. So the guards would run out, so the brothers could go in there, they could snatch their brother up, and they can all get out of there.
So this is a one-street town. You got to make sure that
this is a itty-bitty town, right? And then their National Guard was mobilized, and citizens were coming out with shovels and rakes and stuff like that to try to, like, quote-unquote, defend their homes and shit. And it was just a fucking mess. And then the bikers left. Right, they go back to California. And then when Police Chief Jesus Huerta was interviewed, he, in my opinion, unwittingly, gave them the moniker. He said, no, it was just 1% of the bikers that were causing the problems. It wasn't all of them. It wasn't all the Americans. It was just 1% of them. But I also want to read this out. This is from, as Toast the Ghost says it, Tom Fugel. This is his handwriting.
You take that back right now.
So Tom Fugel wrote this. So again, don't fucking kill me. I'm just quoting Tom. This is the 1960s. Some motorcycle races were held in Tecate, Mexico. Some problems or disagreements came up, and part of the town caught fire. A newspaper later reported that only 1% of the motorcyclists claimed the trouble, which close. It was police chief who only blamed 1% of them. Almost, in quotes, as a joke, the 1%er group was formed by the clubs that were there. Now, this is where we bring the Galloping Goose back in for that right? In the summer of 1962, when the club, he's speaking about El Forastero, when the club was started, the 1% was used as part of the original El Forastero patch. This remains the same today. In 1965, Tiny, Tom, and Pegleg Dave went to get. Everybody has a fucking Dave. Does anybody else? Like, everybody has a fucking Dave. Anyways, Pegleg Dave went to California to meet up with the Hells Angels and the Satan Slaves. The El Forastero Motorcycle Club was then officially accepted into the 1%er organization. Inter-club relationships based upon the 1%ers do not exist now.
Well, hang on. I mean,
for what he was talking about, because so they have Tecate, they all come back and they're all sitting around. The guys that were there said, only 1% of motorcycles could have done what we did, and we're so cool. So they started a club within clubs, the 1% club.
So here's where I differ, just a little bit, just slightly. I think that you're crown. All right. So if you ever had a kid, right now the 1% kid is crowning in that vagina. Okay, after Tecate, and now they have a label. Now they have an idea. Before they were just a few ruffians. Maybe they were outlaws. I would argue that the outlaw title, moniker, whatever, is already born. But we're about to add a percentage to it. And I think it's here.
I'm an outlaw percenter.
I think the final push in labor is the DVR run in 61, which would have been not a complete full year because nobody goes to fucking Death Valley in the summertime. No. It would have not been a complete full year after Tecate, where for anybody that's a nerd, you've seen those very famous photographs of like the road regents, maybe Hell's Angels, of course. I think some Satan slaves or some stray Satans. Don't quote me there. I'm sorry. Getting pictures by Hal Goldstein on the way to this run. That's like the very famous ones where you see the guy with a camera set up and these old bikes coming in and things like that. Not the same ones for Time Life. Before the DVR run and stuff like that. So I think right there, that's when these guys finally get together. So yes, you have a Moniker now. Now you have these most of these kind of same clubs or same type of 1%ers going on this DVR run and stuff like that. They're having shenanigans at the DVR run. There to me is the idea now that, hey, let's get everybody together. Let's get all these accepted clubs, air quotes, together for a meeting, and let's be this 1% brotherhood that is formed. I think that's the final kick out in the delivery room.
Yeah. So the DVR is the shoulders passing through the labia.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I could not agree more.
And
I didn't find a lot of information on the DVR, so that's why I didn't really want to speak on it, because I'm much less knowledgeable on that than you are.
And again, that's not set in stone. I'm not coming down from where'd Moses come from? Mount Sinai? I'm not coming from Mount Sinai. That is just, to me, that makes sense. That aligns well. There's verified pictures from the 50s of very early straight Satans, Hell's Angels, things not wearing a 1% label. Then right around 1960, 1961, you start to see the square patch.
You see the 1% just by itself. First.
Or you just see the 1% by itself and things like that. So for me, I think between 1960 and 1961, that's when it explodes. It comes out of the vagina. Boom, you have a label and a Moniker for the 1%. And so I think, to summarize for folks, you're going from Hollister. Really going from World War II, this pent-up aggression, surplus of bikes, looking forward to racing and getting drunk and not being dead. Going back to stuff, the Salinas Ramblers that put on Hollister have done this race before. You're looking at the club from Riverside that had put on a race before, and it's just, they're not ready for the amount of people that are now into bikes. You have a very different society than we have today as far as what was kind of outlandish and what was scary to the general John Q public. You have all of this stuff. Then you have these the way they look. They wanted to look offensive. It's no secret that that's where the things like Nazi insignia came from and stuff like that, because they could pick up a cheap belt, because they could scare people with it. That's where the outlaw kiss comes from. It kept people away from you. And so I think you have this snowball effect from Hollister, from Riverside, from Tecate, from DVR. You have some very famous paintings that come from the Tecate run and things like that. I mean, I think it's all just this snowball that's rolling downhill, and boom, now you've got a label that you can assign it. And to Jim, like Jim talked about, painting Black Rebel Motorcycle Club on your leather jacket became popular. I want people to understand, again, nothing about clubs is disrespectful here, but like, if you don't have the internet, imagine you don't have the internet, you don't really have TV, you have like radio and newspaper. All that's going to get kind of glamorized in the movies, and the real people would go to the movies and watch short reels of like news. And that's how you got like up-to-date news. That is going to show you California. That is going to show you the famous clubs in California. So for the Midwest, like, they're starting to get the Wild One, and they're starting to get stuff like that. Like if you look at Danny Lloyd's book, again, not dropping names here, but some very early patches of the Outlaws are stitched in are painted in the very same style as the Black Rebel Motorcycle Club. Because we're talking, the early 1950s, the Wild One came out in, Jim, when did the Wild One come out? 53?
I couldn't hear you. What?
When did the Wild One come out? 52, 53? 53. So at that point, you're going from the McCook Outlaws. They're seeing the Wild One, and they start to paint a style like that for their own club. They didn't copy the Black, but they like that style, that leather jacket. And all of a sudden they start to paint Outlaws on the back of their jacket. So you're seeing this effect in the Midwest, Hollywood, California, the beaches, the glitz, the girls, it gets the press. But this was coming into the Midwest and influencing it. And so we stay in the Midwest, and like Ken hit on, you look at Tom, his good friend Tiny, who grew up with, in Iowa. He leaves for the big city in California, comes back telling Tom all these stories about bikers, and Tom's into motorcycles at this point, right? And he's looking for something more. And Tiny comes back and tells him about these things like motorcycle clubs, and that's what they want to do. Tiny was a Ken. What was he? He was a straight Satan.
I believe he was
Satan slave. He was a Satan slave. He wanted to, with Tom, start a chapter of the Satan slaves in Iowa, and they couldn't do it for whatever reason. They couldn't do it. And so
it was a California club. That's why. They told him.
And I'll tell you what. Again, not talking shit, but thank God that he couldn't, because we wouldn't have El Forastero without that happening of events. Maybe we don't have the El Forastero, and then Tiny would decide that Iowa in the winter sucks, and he decides to go back to California, and he becomes a very influential and well-known Hell's Angel. I mean, just the stories. There's so many stories like that. The relationship that builds between the Galloping Goose and the El Forastero, they can tell, but there's an amazing story there. When you hear about the Goose going to this 1%, Brotherhood of Clubs meeting and saying, this is a very famous quote. A very famous story from Mexican Ed is, we're not 1% of anything. I'm going to fuck it up. Jim, what was it?
So they asked Mexican Ed if the Galloping Gooses were going to be a part of this 1% kind of club. And Mexican Ed, who was the president of the Southern California Galloping Goose, said, the Galloping Goose aren't 1% of anything. We are 100% motherfuckers.
There you go. And so, that's a great story. And then we think about Ed Roth, who would kind of be one, not the first, but he would be part of kind of like this brainstorm to create what would become the first support church. Now that went in a wild direction, and that's a story for somebody else to tell. But then he had trading cards. Could you imagine today having fucking trading cards he had presidents of major 1% clubs that you could buy in a magazine.
If they don't sell Drifter as a holographic, I'm gonna be.
There was you could buy patches out of the back of his magazine, out of the back of Chopper's magazine, and one of them was the American Outlaw Association. Now, he didn't mean that to be the club from the Midwest, but could you imagine selling anything that was even close to that today?
That was a different world.
It was crazy, just the difference. And there's so many stories like that. You look at, again, if you read Danny Lloyd's book and some of the characters in there, and a famous one is Cal, is a Chicago outlaw, But his brother Don was a Hell's Angel in California, and before Cal moved to the Midwest, he was a straight Satan, and then he was a Hell. I mean, there's just this mix of guys and these figures today that we think of as just kind of so influential and legendary, and how they intertwine, and all of this comes from before Hollister too, but out of Hollister.
So to get back, I just want to point out a few things. You were talking about, if you're some Midwestern guy, and how do you find out about these clubs that are going on in Southern California and all that? Because that's where all this is born, Southern California. At that time, just like you said, you didn't have internet. You didn't have all other things. All you had was your local newspaper that only covered local stuff, and then they had one page for the international stuff. They're certainly not going to talk about motorcycle clubs. And then you had movies like The Wild One. So that was the end and beginning of your whole motorcycle experience. So that's how these things spread. There's a great example that took place in England, and this is in the later 60s. You had all these clubs popping up using the name Hell's Angels, only because they had seen the movies. They didn't know any Hell's Angels, but they thought it was cool. Now the Hell's Angels went over there and straightened all that out, and a lot of those guys became legitimate Hell's Angels. But just like you were saying, you had no idea about any of this stuff that was going outside of your town. So you saw these things like these movies, and you read these things like The Cyclist Raid, and that was it. So Hollywood really had a big hand in shaping all of this. And so when these guys created this whole 1% club, they kind of looked to themselves, we created all this. This is all about us. And they created this whole 1% club within a club thing.
And again, I think just because, most of us are still active in clubs or hanging around clubs and may join clubs and things like that. And Four for the Road has so many broad representations of different clubs. None of this is meant to be interpreted as law for a certain club. Everything that we have said, you can find yourself on Google. For instance, there's a really great, I encourage you to watch it, Google it, YouTube it, BBC documentary, British, not a big black cock, but the British Broadcasting Company, with the English Hells Angels. And London, sorry. And it talks about, is it the same thing? London, English, England? No?
It was one of many, but London was the big important.
Okay. So there's a documentary, and in it, like to Jim's point, they talk about how they just started calling themselves Hells Angels because they saw it on the TV when the Wild One and this kind of stuff finally came to London, because it was banned for a long time in Europe for 7 years or 8 years or something like that. They couldn't show it.
Yes. So it came on 53, but they couldn't show it in England in a public house until the late 60s. I think 67. I'm not sure.
So imagine you're a guy on a motorcycle. This banned movie comes to your town. You're hearing these stories. It's been years since that movie came out. So think about all the stories that are probably being published in newspapers and National Enquirer type shit. And so they started the Hells Angels. And then in the documentary, the club talks about how they actually started petitioning California to become a real club and all of this stuff. And so they did do it legitimate, and they are very legitimate. But they just started this shit. They're like, we're going to call ourselves the Hells Angels. I mean, the difference in times in the 60 years that have gone by since then is wild.
But yeah, so that I think that about sums it up.
So I think you did a great job on your solo episode. Do you think this? Oh, I got a trivia question for you. When was the 99% first published in a magazine? And what magazine was it?
When your mother wrote it. That was going to be, it's either the October-December 62 issue of the AMA magazine, and it was 99%. And I believe the quote goes something like, 99% of motorcyclists bring credit upon the sport.
Bravo.
Close. It was 1961.
That's what I said, 1961.
You said 62. Play it back, baby. Play it back.
So fun fact, I can't play it back. And that's going in the episode. I don't give a fuck.
It was part of their
we're not experts.
It was part of their Best Wheel Forward campaign. And to put the AMA's Best Wheel Forward, you, as part of the 1% trash that they thought you were not allowed to be a part of that. So That's why they had the best wheel forward, and that is why they published 99% of motorcycles are not dickheads. So there you go.
My worst wheel forward. How about that, AMA?
Oh, that would have been good back in the day to have a worst wheel forward campaign. Somebody's going to make that a patch. Somebody's going to make that a patch.
That's the next Black Sales t-shirt.
Oh,
it'll be an inside joke. You got to listen to this podcast.
I'm going to trademark Put Your Worst Wheel Forward, and I'm going to sell it to Jace.
What about like
winter camp out too?
What about like a WWC with like a tire or something like that, like the worst wheel crew or something like that? I think there's a thing there. There's something. Play with it. There's something there.
Worst wheel backwards.
So before we end, though, I have a question. If you were getting ready to wrap up, I do have a question. So we've not even scratched the surface. I mean, you talk about, you talk about Tiny and Tom. You hit, obviously the Angels and the legendary characters there. We talk about Tecate, and you talk about, the paintings that have been done. David Mann. You talk about the Galloping Goose and the famous paintings by John Altoon for the back patch, and all of these names that come together. We talked even in the beginning. We talked about George Ellers and Yonkers Motorcycle Club and everything. Do you have to let 60 years go by to realize that you are in the presence of history-changing events in the motorcycle club world? Or do we have figures today? And no disrespect here, but I'm not counting Sonny in that. I know he recently passed and things like that. But to me, he's an influential figure from the 60s and the 70s, et cetera. In the 2010s, the 2020s, whatever, and forward, do you think we'll recognize, or that we do recognize, influential figures that are MC community?
So I have met people that have never heard of this show that know Drifter.
You have not.
I swear.
I believe it 100%.
I know people who I've had to inform them about For the Road who have heard of you.
I believe it.
So that do with that information what you will. But no, I believe unless it's like dude, it's got to be some like 9/11 shit to happen for us to be like, oh, this is history in the making right here. No, I don't think we're gonna know. I think it's
that's a really odd reference point.
I think what'll happen. I think what'll happen is in the future, somebody will be doing research, and this person will be well known, and they'll do a big paper, big book, or something, and they'll mention somebody from our time period, and then that person will be investigated by other people, and then next thing you know, that's the Mexican Ed of our time, or that's the Sonny Barger of our time.
Are clubs too closed off and too secretive and too uncooperative nowadays to have that kind of character? Because let's again, the Tinies, the Toms, the Mexican Eds, all of these, even Sonny himself, these were names that every club knew, and they're just, oh my God, you're talking about I don't want to overstress the fact you're talking about like a 1/50th of the big names and the info that people knew back in the day. Are clubs capable of doing that again today? I'm with Ken. I don't know that they are. I think they're too closed off.
So man, I don't know. I'm kind of wishy-washy on this one because on one hand, I believe so, yes. And a lot of it has to do with social media. And it happens when one guy in a club gets kind of out of pocket, and then that causes problems for that club. Even though he may or may not have been spouting off of the mouth, saying shit that the club doesn't necessarily agree with. Now that's where a policy comes in, right? Saying, hey, look, that's it. Fucking social media's done, whatever, right?
But they didn't have social media.
True. However, okay, so you're talking about like just without the internet, even in 2022.
Just among clubs, do we have influential figures that we will recognize as influential figures?
I think absolutely.
Okay.
I think absolutely.
Who are those? No, I'm just kidding. Don't name drop. But
Jimothy Drifter from the 13.
You guys need to stop that shit because I'm not buying it.
So
actually, I would like to go back a little bit.
Okay.
And one thing we didn't touch on is that at the beginning of this whole easy boy. This whole thing, when it started, this whole 1% club within a club kind of thing, this organization, at that time, only a 1%er could make a 1%er. And you still see remnants of that today. There are some clubs that the club is not a 1% club. Some of the individuals are. So not everybody in that club is a 1%er. So that's really how it was. Basically, a diamond can make a diamond. Although this is pre-diamond, but that's how it worked.
So, hey, Jimbo, before we get to going, you said you got something else that you wanted to bring up. So let's do that because my dinner's on the table.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk real quick about how this whole outlaw thing got started before the 1%er. I'm talking about right after World War II.
Okay.
So whenever these GIs came back after World War II, the whole country was saying, "Okay, great job, guys. You had this great war and you beat Nazis and good job. Now get back to normal. Go back to your 9 to 5 job. Go have kids. Get back to your houses and be normal again."
And Jim knows this from personal experience. He was there.
Yeah, never been normal.
In the
So
1940s.
how can you tell that to these guys that have seen some of the worst atrocities ever? They come back, they got to blow this off, man. They got to get together. So they start gravitating toward each other. And that's where you get this whole a little wild one mentality going on. They're going to drink a little harder. They're going to ride a little harder. They're going to be with guys that understand what they all went through. And I think that's really the very beginning. Before Hollister, before all that, I think that's the beginning of this whole, what we're talking about on this podcast, this whole 1%er, this whole outlaw, even motorcycle clubs in general, how they are today. It started there whenever these guys came back from the war and were told to be normal again. So there.
And there you have it, folks. Man, that was a perfect fucking ending to that. Dave, you got anything before we take off?
No, that was good, Jim. You hit it on the head.
He really did, man. So hey, it was a pleasure sitting down and talking with y'all tonight. And we hope that you guys are home listening or in your truck. I feel like most people listen to us in the truck. So if you're heading eastbound and down listening to us ramble, we appreciate your love and support on this. I think we got some pretty cool stuff lined up for you. That's bullshit. We don't have anything lined up after this. We kind of slapped this one together last minute.
I got ideas.
So Jim's got ideas. He's gonna make me get off my ass and get down to my office, get on my ass, and have this. So, but yeah, we appreciate it, and we'll catch you next time, guys.
Bye.